Good to see you.
Good to be here.
I know she needs no introduction, but I've been told I have to give her one anyway. So let me just say, Elizabeth Warren is a first-term Democratic senator from Massachusetts. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was her idea. She chaired the Congressional Oversight Panel of TARP, was a professor at Harvard, author of the New York Times bestseller, A Fighting Chance. Anything I'm missing? Is that good for top lines? Okay. Senator Warren, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So just to start off with an idea, since we're at the Idea Festivals, you and former Speaker Newt Gingrich have joined to take on the issue. Is he out there?
Think about that.
To take on the charge to increase funding for the National Institutes of Health.
Yep.
How did this odd couple, if you'll permit me for saying so,
okay. You're within the
how did this odd couple come into fruition? How did you meet him?
Well, start with the idea that's behind it, and that is, what's one of the principal functions of government? It's to think about our future over a long arc, not just until next week or even the next funding cycle, but what does it look like overall? And I'm going to give you some really bad news. Fastest growing age group in America is people over 100. You know, then over 90, then over 80. You see a pattern here. We are getting older. I mean, not you and me, obviously.
Well, we are. No, we are.
But in general, as a country. Yeah. So here's another one I just want you to intersect with that. Alzheimer's, one of the principal age-related diseases. This year, we will spend $225 billion just in care for people with Alzheimer's, and that's care, without the ability to delay onset by even 1 day, without the ability to promise the hope that we can give any kind of amelioration of what's happening in this terrible disease as it moves forward. So, did this just fall?
It fell off your ear. It fell off your ear.
It fell off my ear. Right in the middle of this. Okay, there we go. So how much are we spending on research? Here we are with our toes, according to the head of the National Institute for Mental Health, on the edge of being able to do more in brain science and brain research. And how much of that $226 billion are we spending on research? Less than 0.2%. Over the last, since 2003, the National Institutes of Health have had their effective budget, their purchasing power cut by 25%. When you think about how we build a future, research is a big part of how we build a future. And right now, the United States Congress is cutting back on NIH. It's treating NIH as if it is a stepchild to our budget and to our future. So, Speaker Gingrich, I think I've lost this.
You lost it again.
All right, there we go. Oh, that was fun. Speaker Gingrich is somebody who gets this. And he wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal about how we should think about investing in brain science research in particular, medical research, and just take it off book, that it just shouldn't even be part of this is an investment in the future. And so he wrote this op-ed, and I picked up the phone, and I said, "Hi, Mr. Speaker, this is Elizabeth Warren. You want to work together on this?" And he said, "Absolutely." And he came, and we did a hearing together, and we're going to keep working on this because this is about building a sustainable future for all of America, and research is one of the pieces that's right at the heart of that.
Obviously, we're in the throes of a presidential campaign. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. I don't know if you've picked that up in the newspapers.
I've heard it.
You have said that you will endorse a Democratic candidate in the primaries.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be one of the Republicans. I've seen enough.
You were one of many female Democratic senators to sign a letter a few years ago urging Secretary Clinton to run. Should that be seen as an endorsement in itself?
No, she's running, along with other people, and they're getting their ideas out there, and I think that's what should happen during this part of the season.
So you just wanted her to run?
Well, I want everyone who wants to run for president to get out there, put their ideas out there, talk about their ideas with the American people. That's how it should be. That's how democracy is supposed to work.
When I spoke with Senator Bernie Sanders on my show recently, I asked him where he and Secretary Clinton differed. He mentioned a number of areas, including reestablishing Glass-Steagall, expanding Social Security by lifting the cap on taxable income, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think that you and Bernie Sanders align fairly closely on all the major issues. When you decide who to endorse, is it just going to be about who you agree with the most, or will you be taking other things into consideration, such as who has a better chance of being the nominee or winning in November?
Look, at this moment, I don't know because I'm not there. What I do know is that people are out talking about these key ideas, and I think that's exactly the right thing to do. I think we should be talking about Glass-Steagall. I think we should be talking about the role that the major financial institutions play, not just in this economy, but play in the political sphere here in Washington. I think we should be talking about minimum wage. I think we should be talking about college debt. I think there are a lot of issues we should be talking about. And by the way, I know that, you know, where you want to put the focus, but I want to also keep the focus on this is a time when you couldn't see a sharper difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans have gone in such a different direction on what they think are the issues that we should be talking about and where they come out on what I think are principal issues, particularly principal economic issues. I mean, the idea that here we are, we need to get a budget together. There's a lot to be negotiated around that budget. And what is the first thing the Republicans say they have to stand up and do, and that's defund Planned Parenthood. And it just seems to be, that is so out of touch with reality. It's so out of touch with what it means to govern this country that they think they've got to argue something so they can try to move women back to 1955, that's first on their agenda. And they're just wrong on this, and they're going to be in real trouble over it.
I want to talk about Planned Parenthood in a second, but before I entirely drop the subject, do you disagree with the idea that you and Bernie Sanders seem to be more closely aligned on issues than you are with other Democrats running for president?
Do you want to ask this 6 different ways?
That's kind of my job.
Yeah, well, and kind of my job is to get out there and to keep pushing these issues. You know, I will say this. Bernie gets out and he fights for what he believes in. He fights from the heart on these issues. And I think he's done an enormous service by pushing them forward into the agenda. I think that Secretary Clinton has also been pushing forward issues into the agenda that are really important. For example, she just endorsed Senator Baldwin's bill to try to slow down the revolving door here in Washington. That is really important. So God bless, at least we got some Democrats out there talking about the things that matter to the American people, talking about how we build a real future. And it makes me proud to be a Democrat.
Do you see the Democratic Party moving in the more progressive direction than it was, say, in the 90s?
You probably need a pundit to line all that up, but I got to say, yeah, I think we are. I think we're getting in touch with what really matters. Look, part of the reason is the urgency. Watch what's happening to America's middle class, to America's working families, to America's poor. Let me do one quick fact on this. From 1935 to 1980, God dang it. All right, one more time. From 1935 to 1980, we're coming out of the Great Depression. What do? We do two things. We put a cop on the beat on Wall Street, and we start investing in our future together, in education, in infrastructure, in research. And we build America's great middle class. The 90%, everybody outside the top 10%, the 90% get 70% of all wage growth in this country. So GDP is going up, and families across the spectrum, they're doing better. Trickle-down economics hits in the 1980s, and you just watch this reverse. So from 1980 to 2012, that's the latest year for which we have data, the 90%, everybody outside the 10%, you know how much they got? They got 0% of income growth. 100% of income growth. GDP kept going up. 100% of income growth went to the top 10% in America. And that has become clear now to us. That has become clear even in the bubble of Washington. And that's what Democrats are talking about. They're talking about what are the things we need to do to build a future, not just for a thin slice at the top, but to build a future for all Americans. That's what it's supposed to be about. Yeah, it happened again.
What do you make of the fact that two of the leading Republican presidential candidates, Donald Trump and Jeb Bush, are now both endorsing closing the loophole when it comes to hedge fund managers, the carried interest loophole?
It means that even when your ears are stuffed with money, you get a little sound that comes through. And that's what's happening here. It's like, hello, billionaires should not be paying taxes at a lower rate than teachers and firefighters. And that has even seeped through to a few of the rich guys on the other side. Stunner.
Let's talk about Planned Parenthood, because you brought it up. Obviously,
is that the only reason you want to talk about it?
No, it's obviously in the news. There was the hearing earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, your position in supporting Planned Parenthood is well established. The reason that Planned Parenthood purportedly was in front of the congressional hearing was because of these videotapes of Planned Parenthood officials saying and doing things that even Planned Parenthood questioned in terms of the glibness. Is there nothing on the videotapes that you saw that bothers you at all?
Look, let's remember what we were debating on the floor of the United States Senate, and that was defunding Planned Parenthood. It was not, let's do a review of videotapes. It was defunding Planned Parenthood. And so we have to start by remembering what that means. 2.7 million people get their health care from Planned Parenthood every year. 1 in every 5 women in America, sometime in her life, will get her health care from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, what does it mostly do? 97% of what Planned Parenthood does is about cancer screenings, about screenings for STDs, about birth control. Planned Parenthood is in more than half of all of the Planned Parenthood clinics are in places where there's limited access to health care. So this, for many people, for many women, is their only health care provider, sometimes their principal health care provider. And the Republicans say the first issue that we've got to discuss, and the number one thing, everything else can go forward on the budget or not go forward, or we can cut everything else. The first thing we've got to do is defund Planned Parenthood. That means defunding health care for women. And make no mistake, what this is really about is about women's access to abortion. And even though not one federal dollar goes to pay for abortions through Planned Parenthood, the Republicans want to find one more way to make it harder, to make it impossible for a woman who is facing one of the most difficult decisions of her life. They want to find a way to make it harder on her to get the health care she needs. And all I can say is, we've been in that world before. When I talk about 1955, I'm talking about a world where women died. I'm talking about a world where women committed suicide rather than go forward with a pregnancy they could not handle. And what the Republicans are saying is they want to go back, and I want to make it clear we are not going back. Not now, not ever.
It's too bad they're not doing a straw poll here.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you something. We are doing a straw poll. It's called the 2016 elections. And the Republicans want to get out there, and they want to run on shutting down women's access to cancer screenings and shutting down women's access to birth control and shutting down women's access to not government paid for abortions, then they're going to have a real fight on their hands. Let them do it.
You've been a longtime advocate for financial reform, and in the past you have there have been words between you and then Senator Joe Biden, and you've pointed out that his state, Delaware, his home state, Delaware, is one where a lot of banks are headquartered. You recently met with him. What can you tell us about that meeting? What can you tell us about where he is on these issues that matter a great deal to you?
Well, we had a long lunch and talked about a whole range of policy issues, but principally about how we're going to rebuild America's middle class, about how we create opportunities for working families, how we create opportunities for poor families. And both of us see that this is a principal role of government. It's about the investments we need to make and the investments we need to make together. And look, I'll hit yours straight on. We also talked about the need for a cop on the beat on Wall Street. We talked about support for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And it was a good conversation. You know, Joe Biden is somebody who cares about America and cares about America's families. And I think that's been true for a long time. And so that's what the conversation was about.
You have disagreed very sharply.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
You bet. Yeah. And it was over bankruptcy laws that the credit card companies wanted to just tighten those bankruptcy laws so they could squeeze some more profits out of working families. And Senator Biden was on one side in that fight, and I was on the other. And you better believe I didn't hold back.
Are you still on opposite sides of those issues?
On that issue, yeah.
Speaking of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, there is a move in Congress right now to replace the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau with a five-person bipartisan panel.
Yep.
Some of the Democrats in the House that have expressed support for it say it will be a protection for if a Republican is ever in the White House.
I'm sorry, not just some of the Democrats said that. That's what the president of the American Bankers Association came out and said yesterday. He said he is so worried about this consumer agency that has forced the largest financial institutions in this country to return more than $10 billion to families they cheated. He is so worried about keeping that agency up and strong that he wants to make sure there is a five-person commission like there is over at the SEC, because that's really going to keep the CFPB strong.
You don't buy it.
Do I look dumb?
No. Just in case you were wondering what my answer was.
Always good to get these things on the record.
Well, just on the record, you don't look dumb. You've also being accused this week of leading ideological purges. That's from the conservative Wall Street Journal editorial page. Specifically,
it's been quite a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You obviously you weren't the biggest fan of the idea of Larry Summers becoming Fed chair. You blocked Antonio Weiss from becoming Undersecretary for Domestic Finance. And more recently, you objected to a non-resident scholar from Brookings presenting a paper in which he didn't fully disclose, according to Brookings rules, where the money came from. Are you leading an ideological purge?
So look, let's talk about the situation at Brookings. This isn't personal. Dr. Lighton published a study that was just way out of line with the findings from other independently funded research.
About a specific rule.
About a specific rule, and the rule is whether or not there ought to be what's called a conflict of interest rule, so that investment companies can't recommend products to consumers that are really great for the agent who's recommending them, but really lousy for the consumer. So that's, the Department of Labor's put out a rule. And what the research generally shows is that American families are losing about $17 billion a year to an industry and to certain players in the industry who just favor themselves, that is the broker, over the customer. So that's what the research, and there's been a lot of other research around this, and Dr. Lighton puts out a study, totally comes out the other way. And then it gets criticism in academic circles for the methodology. And so he came in front of a committee that I'm on to testify, and there's just a little line in the testimony about research supported by, and it identifies one of the companies that stands potentially to lose money if the Department of Labor rule goes through and that very much likes the outcome that Dr. Lighton has addressed. So I just followed up. I did questions for the record to ask for more information about where the money had come from, and we found out a couple of things. That he personally got $38,000 for this, that a company he works for got more than $70,000 for this, and that the company that funded it, they were the sole funder, and they got to look at, advise, review the work as it was a work in process. And so that raises some real questions about the independence of the research and the findings. And so I wrote a letter to the Department of Labor because this research has been cited a lot by the industry. The industry has really been pounding on this piece of research. So I wrote a letter to the Department of Labor about it. And I wrote a letter asking Brookings about it. And that's where it went from there.
All right, that's all the time we have. Senator Elizabeth Warren, everybody.